John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.
Once upon a time, very long time ago, 950 billion years ago, in fact, in Earth time, in this time matrix, there was an agreement made by a bunch of ascended master groups. They were ascended while they actually hadn't descended yet. They decided they wanted to experience it was already said, other time matrices had been created, they'd already done it, but ours came into being 950 billion years ago in terms of Earth time translation. There was an agreement that this would be a free will, love-based matrix. It would be a joyful experience. Now, there's a certain structure of physics that God Source used to create the matrices in the first place. They were self-regenerating. If there was any problem that got so big in the use of free will that it got so out of hand that it threatened to destroy the matrix itself, it would simply regenerate its original divine blueprint. And if beings acted in ways that had gotten themselves in situations where they progressively ignored the rules they had agreed to play by in the first place, where they repeatedly ignored the fact that they agreed to be responsible when they came into the matrix and loving toward others. If beings get themselves in a position where they have hugely and massively abused those natural laws of creation physics that we all agreed to enter and took on into our body forms, into our templates when we came, there is a consequence for actions here. It is not that it is unfair. It is that we are supposed to be responsible. There's the question of where is the love in a universe where people can fall into a black hole system and they can implode. I ask, where isn't the love? If these people were people who were devastating every life field they touched, who no matter how much love and open, healing, opportunity, anything that was given to them, they still didn't care, because they had become so distorted in their templates and their consciousness that they could not remember the love at all. They were beings that continually fed off innocent, loving beings who were trying to abide by the general rules of an eternal life matrix. Now, nobody put these beings in a black hole. Nobody sent them there. Nobody put them in cosmic prison. They put themselves in cosmic prison. They made choices, and they took their freedom and their knowledge of the Templar, and they attempted to use that knowledge to attack other life systems in a very large way. And it backfired. And the frequencies they sent, law of reciprocity, came back and it imploded part of their grids. And they ended up in a black hole. Now, they had a choice when that happened. There's still, talk about a fair universe. Even if you get that out of line and you try to do something that nasty, take down a whole time matrix by using the crystal power of the Templar, there's still hope, okay? Source has still provided for the opportunity to re-evolve out of that system. Our phantom matrix system that was part of our matrix that fell had that opportunity. And for 250 billion years, we allowed phantom matrix to stay open in order to try to heal all of the beings that had fallen and re-educate them to the law of one and loving, being able to act loving. The Wisdek matrix that we talk about, that I really don't like to talk about. I don't like to talk about any of them, except we really need to know what they're up to right now, because it's really critical. These beings, once they fell, that wasn't enough. They decided that because they were extremely intelligent, they had the knowledge of the Templar, of a founders race, which are like the Christos founders races. They had D11.5 of that level of consciousness. Now, each frequency band you hold active in your body and in your being is a level of consciousness and awareness. The higher up you go and hold in frequency, the more you understand. Real Christ-conscious beings, not the false ones that run around in the New Age movement and pretend they have 12 strands activated, but if you asked them what a fire code was, they just kind of turn blue and say, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, okay, I'm getting... I'm not going in there, okay. Anyway, the where is the love question is extremely important when it comes to responsibility for our own selves, the beings that created the situation for themselves, where the law of reciprocity came back and showed them a lesson about what they were doing to other life forms. They didn't accept the lesson. They still were trying to blame it on somebody else, but because they were gifted with incredible intelligence and incredible knowledge of the Templar, they created a mutation by further abusing the laws from their black hole matrix, and they forced their way through into living systems by creating something called the Metatronic Code. The Metatronic Code takes a natural divine blueprint of one matrix, rips half of it apart, takes another part of the divine blueprint from another matrix, rips that apart, reverses all the sequences of what would be numbers or letters, if you're going to look at fire letters that way, and then forces them together into an artificial template that cannot run D12 or higher frequency. Now, they made the choice to do this to their matrix. When they did that to their matrix, they did it to their templates. They sealed their destiny when they made that choice, because once a template is mutated to that degree, it no longer has enough of either of the original templates to re-evolve it back into its natural scalar wave form, which means it is a finite template. It means that if it doesn't feed life force off other living organisms that do have divine blueprint templates, it will begin to feed off itself like cancer until it implodes its own template. Now, the black hole people in the Wisdek matrix got themselves into this, not because somebody inflicted it on them. They got themselves into it because they had mutated themselves so far already, they had no memory whatsoever of Christ consciousness or loving another being. The word love means nothing to them. They're the ones that you need to ask, where is the love? And there's an answer for where is the love with those beings. It's lost with their divine blueprint that they originally came out of and ripped their matrix out of. The love is still there in them on that level. They have Christos avatars that mourn their loss. Just like if you had a piece of you that fell off and it went into a situation where you could never bring it back again in the form that you knew it. There would be a sadness and a great sense of loss, but also an understanding that there is a divine balance and a divine mercy and a divine unconditional love. When that happens to a race or being, nobody cannot go home to God. Because the whole matrix itself takes place within God, takes place within the whole consciousness of God. You can't leave it. There's nothing outside of it. And everything, even a being that's acting bad, is still made of the units of the consciousness of God, even though they may be cut off from the rest of the units of the consciousness of God that would allow them to understand that connection. Beings in black hole matrices, their systems eventually implode. Their body templates implode, particularly the shadow dancers, because they latch themselves onto other life forms. And if those other life forms decided to rightfully sever the codes, the cords that they're attaching to and robbing energy from them, see, they'll kill life forms. They'll drain the life right out of them and then go on to the next one and cord the next one. What happens when a being becomes aware and takes responsibility for not allowing things to compromise its own connection to God? It takes responsibility for severing those cords, for healing whatever shadow may be there. And when that happens to a shadow dancer who made a decision long ago to be a vampire instead of a Christos being, they no longer have the cord to feed on, and their own templates start to implode within themselves. Now, they have about 2 billion years left over there, so it's not as if what we're doing here right now is going to do anything to them. But you know what? If we don't do something, we're not going to be here to talk about it. We're going to be back there with them, totally metatronically coded. And what happens when a being over here falls in to that matrix? We get assimilated. That means the you who you think you are, the original consciousness that was you, no longer is. Your template's been ripped apart and reassimilated as raw units of energy. You are gone.
Hey guys, Andre Hodge, Seven of Truth, Infinite Potential here with you once more. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey in whatever form it is up until now. I come to you with an interesting concept that I worked out during the week. And it might be a bit complicated to sort of explain. I'll do my best. But I think I've worked something out, and so because it's related to what may be dormant in us, it's going to be echoes, amplify the echoes of our soul's ancient truth, part 7, and I'm going to label it our dormant potential that awaits us. I think that's a better topic and heading than what it's really about, because I'll use the subject I'm going to talk about as a key to recognize potentially other things in you, alright? Because obviously I've shared my journey pretty thoroughly in many respects, but this I'll share some other stuff because I'll use me as a metaphor, but it's because I'm a guy and I might have a different feel for things and it might seem like I'm a bit desensitized to things. It's not. It's just because perhaps in my own journey I've overcome it. And maybe I do have an advantage being a guy because the sexes are very different and the effects of the body and technology and all that are vastly different, and what interests we have and all that sort of stuff, right? No matter what the narrative says, okay? So what I'm going to do is identify this this pattern I've observed. Now that I've understood the Ashiana stuff quite well, it's given me this foundation of truth. Like I show that image of truth and it's very stable and it gives you the ability to perceive stuff. So now I've got all these data points. I'm very fortunate because I've had a lot of really amazing people gravitate to me over the years, particularly women that are very aware, and I don't take that for granted. It's like a reflection of the responsibility I have energetically and stuff, that I am trusted and stuff. That I'll just get into that. I'll say that. Right? Honestly, I'm a bit like the last resort. Everyone goes to see everyone else and then they come and see me and then I put them back together and stuff. And all the Galactic Special Forces sort of stuff I've done, I've put those people back together over and over, right? And all the other stuff I've done, right? I'm having to talk about myself because nothing's ever been acknowledged and stuff, right? And that's a missing variable that people don't get. And you can take it as egotistic that I need to say it, but it's a variable that will help. Got some birds flying around. to see the codex relative to me and why I can say all this stuff and why I can do earth-pranic healings. All right, those of you that actually listen to them, and thank you for exploring them. I think it shows to me the lack of trust and belief in what I can do, and that's cool. But I'm ready to go to the next level and stuff, and I feel like I'm in a next level from doing that. And this perception I get as a gift for doing these sort of things, clarity is one of the, and confidence and self-assuredness and stuff like that. Because I've just done all that stuff in the past, I've sort of gotten on top to some degree that most people might be struggling with at the moment, right? But yeah, this aversion to violence variable is very, very interesting to me, right? And I'm using that as an example that probably many people have different examples of, but the actual visceral reaction of that aversion to violence is very interesting. In this Echo series, I sort of, and all my videos, I'll just say this as well. I think a lot of people are tuning into me and trying to discern me and think I've got issues or gaps in my awareness and stuff of the stuff I share. My intent behind sharing what I do and the perspectives are relative to an aspect of the target audience that probably are new to all this field and they haven't ever explored anyone, or they might be veterans like me that have gone through a lot and they haven't found the answers and stuff like that. So I just want to really clarify that, alright, that when I make these videos, I'm looking for those really aware advanced beings that are playing catch up. So I'm trying to accelerate their development by giving very dense sort of information at a reasonable pace. So I'm aiming for those entry to intermediate sort of level people that are looking for a fast track of the data to lay the foundations for their awareness and their perception. So I'm very deliberate in what I share. Right? But I'm also aiming for the very advanced people that have been veterans that haven't found the answers yet, and give them the truth codex keys to unlock what may be dormant in them just by hearing this stuff. Because to me, I've had countless times over the years of exploring the information I explore, and that's why I share the components I share with all the different teachers, that when you get a perspective that is aligned to what is, it can unlock dormant things such as DNA and activations and all that sort of stuff. Because when you get that key as a foundation, then it's like conscious Tetris. I haven't shown that clip for a while, but it's exactly what it is. Because you know what happens in Tetris, it gets blocked up until you can't clear the levels, but you need a component to clear the level. And that's why I show that narrative sort of, and the sub-narrative in part 5 concept. Because unless you get the sub-narrative components to understand what it's actually coming from the bottom up for the top layers to make sense. If you don't comprehend the sub-layers, then you won't comprehend what's going on. And most people don't want to dig deep beyond the 3D 5 cents and stuff, and so they're quite vulnerable. The other thing, I made this drawing quick. This is a bit of a metaphor of what's going on in the world, right? So over that side is control and chaos harvest, alright? So the black areas where there's been a lot of control for a long time, and the level can be quite low, alright? But say if it drops a bit, then there's a relationship between the escalation of chaos, alright, for the harvest. So the instability has a benefit. Does that make sense for the control? So if it's energy, people go through emotional instability, then where does that go, alright? So it's just a bit of a metaphor of what's going on now. So say it goes to the green, and the green needs more craziness to get what was previously gained from the people that lose control. So say the awakening goes on, and that scale drops, the escalation over this side must balance it out. So just see the world is a bit crazy, and it's going to get a bit crazier because the system needs to gain the energy to maintain control. So there's instability, wars, conflicts and all that sort of stuff, right? It's an interesting metaphor of how to perceive the reality, and so you can disarm it, alright? Disarm the effect on you, as I said in the recalibration shows, alright? If I've got an image relative to the recalibration. I couldn't find the second one. I did pretty quick. But yeah, just see your personal versus the reality versus the galactic metagroove sort of stuff, solar flares and all that. So if you can appreciate what I said before, then it's a bit easier to handle, alright? So I think I worked out another name for myself as well. If you've ever watched The Life of Brian, it's a Monty Python movie. It's very funny. It's done in the 70s or 80s, and it's probably banned these days because it's, you know, it's actually funny. But they have Roman names. And there's a pretty funny scene in there. You should go watch it. You'll have a good laugh. But I worked out a new name for me. Maximus Bratius. So I'm in brat mode. I think I've worked out something pretty cool. And yeah, in this video I might show clips during it, or I might just show one at the start and one at the end. And I may have shown one just sort of in the middle of that intro chat. Yeah, the aversion to violence, alright? So I'll describe me a bit, and I'll try not to make this too long. I had an interesting childhood. I had to move 15 times before I was 5. Obviously in the 3D you don't understand what's going on, but then in hindsight with the multi-D sort of concepts that are going on, and us as beings, and most of you have probably been through a lot of the people that seek me out have been through pretty horrific childhoods and stuff, and challenged, and there's no context, right? But say with the Ashiana stuff and the indigos and the invasion and all the metaphor that I've said in those previous episodes of this series, and I'm not abusing this Amplify the Echoes of Our Soul's Ancient Truth theme, this definitely goes in alignment with it, because I think I've got a way of unlocking your potential in your DNA, and it's very, very cool. So I had a Dutch father, the Dutch aspect. My grandmother was in the banking system, and she married someone from outside the lineage, like the bloodline sort of stuff, and he stole money from the banking system. So my grandmother from that side and him got banished from the family. So you imagine if they're the controlling aspect with the bloodline and stuff, then the stigma for that ejection from the family, it was like psychic warfare and stuff. So I think I had about 6 or 7 uncles and aunties from my father's side, and I've got the oldest is still, she came over to Australia and is alive still and stuff, and the whole Dutch side has been really epic. Not a lot of them are still alive and stuff. So when I was planning to go to Europe early 2020 to finish off, from my intent, many things, but just touch my Dutch DNA on the ground, it was going to be very interesting in Europe, because I've got a lot of codes, obviously. And part of the aspect was potentially accommodation in Holland and stuff like that, right? But what happened was, from my perspective, the banishment was psychic warfare targeting, because we were outside a threat, and my ancestors violated that sort of stuff, right? So we had an escalation of craziness going on. So, in Australia, the Aboriginals, they drink and all that sort of stuff, and a lot of the Indigenous around the world, they have substance abuse sort of issues. The shamans have been eliminated, so the energy hygiene isn't there, and the law over the land from the negative dreamtime sort of stuff targets them because they're threats. So people with codes and all that sort of stuff, indigos and all that, are also, from my perspective, the targeting. Like, not having the Ashiana stuff made that hard to understand. So yeah, so that was going on, but there's no concept of it, especially in the 70s and 80s. And so one of the places that we ended up was in the Nullarbor Plain, place called Sajina. It's like in the middle of the desert sort of thing, and very isolated, and so we were there for a while, and I was about 4.5, 5. I think it was 1980. And it was really interesting. We had one channel on the TV, and it had I think it was like 6 to 11, and then 3 till 9 at night. That's all it had airing. And it was interesting. There was a couple of cartoons back then. One was Battle of the Planets, and the other was Star Blazers. Battle of the Planets was about 5 kids that were genetically engineered to be super, like, saviors of the universe sort of thing. And Star Blazers is interesting because Earth was being attacked by alien species, and it was about the Yamato battleship that was created into a starship sort of thing. It was like 1980s stuff, like, very interesting. They're very interesting cartoons to watch. They're out there on YouTube and stuff. But I was only 4.5, 5. We lived through a mouse plague, which is pretty epic. If you open your fridge and you have 20 or 30 mouses and mice and everywhere and stuff, and trailer loads of dead mice and stuff, and pretty epic. But one of the things that I came across, I think it was the father of a friend that I had, he was into horror. And so I actually, you think I'm brave and all that, I freaking hate horror films. I was obviously very traumatized as a kid, but one of the horrors I reckon I saw, or I know I saw, and I think it was them that they played it, and it impacted me like 4 or 5 years old. I remember the 1950s Blob movie, and it was like, I remember this farmer like poking the blob with a stick, and the blob crawled up his arm, up the stick and up his arm, and ate him and all that sort of stuff. So I've got a massive aversion to jam or jelly. You guys in America call it jelly, peanut butter and jelly. Massively impacted by that stuff, right? There was this other horror movie. It was about like these teenagers, and they would fall down these caves, these holes, and there was these monkey men, and what he would do, he'd jump on them and kill them. So I remember that there was this bully that annoyed the crap out of me and stuff, and I remember we were on a trampoline, and he was just being a fucking dick, and pardon my language, it was being a pain in the ass. And I remember I went by what in that movie, and an aspect of me switched, and I was like beating him up for being this bully, and I clobbered him by jumping on him and stuff, and I think the friendship ended and everyone was quiet and stuff. I remember that, driving home in a car like 4.5 and stuff. But yeah, a couple other things was, I remember in 1987 I went to a drive-in. They used to have 2 movies. I forget what the first one is. I wish I could remember. But the second one, late, was The Predator, the original Predator movie. And I remember I was in the front seat, and technology and audio and stuff in the 80s isn't that good, but you listen to it on the radio and stuff. And I remember the scene in that where the big guy, he gets killed, and the predator is invisible, and the guy that saw it saw the green eyes flash and freaked out, and they all started shooting at the jungle. And I remember how scared they were. And that scene, I don't think I've ever been as scared of anything in my life. And so that I just asked Mum, can we go, like, get out of there and stuff like that. It was terrifying. And I was like, I'm usually in a lot of control in everything, like everything I've explored, but I felt like I was very much not in control of the level of fear I was in. So it was really interesting. I can tune back in and stuff like that. So yeah, I was pretty traumatized by that movie and stuff. And I think those sort of things are, particularly that, is a bit like past experiences of being hunted by beings like that, right? Like predator beings that are hunting us. And it's interesting, there's a new version coming out called Prey that's sort of involved with the Native Americans and stuff. So, like I said with Captain Marvel and, in one of the, I think it was number 2 of the Earth Planet Killings, I talked about Obi-Wan series and the hunting of the Magi. I'm pretty sure that the predator sort of beings were created to hunt down the Magi as well. So that's after the fall of the Iani massacre 25,000 years ago, where the surface of the control was under control and stuff. So there was an interesting experience also in between that. I think it was a year or two before 1987. So what I'm sort of suggesting is haven't been totally desensitized to violence and stuff like that, and I've had visceral reactions to things like that, right? So I've got references of experiences and influences and all that sort of stuff, right? There's a very interesting, so I'm giving you that I'm not perfect, and I can empathize, like I did the video empathy sonar, one of the multi-dimensional methods to the 3D madness sort of thing, how you can use your empathy to tune in to the reality as a sonar, right? And that goes along with the Chaos 19 and stuff like that, right? But in between that, right, I had an experience in my school, and I went in Australia 0 to year 7, and is called primary school, and year 8 to 12 is high school, right? It might be different now, and different schools, different systems have different years, but so this was in about, I think it was year 4, so I was about 10. Or it could have been 11, year 6. So it was around that time and that. So I don't know if you've been into movies around then, but there was a Gremlins. Gremlins was another one, right? But this is a different experience because I witnessed something pretty interesting. Because then I can measure my desensitization to violence compared to another. And I remember what they would do, we'd have 3 or 4 terms back then, and at the end of the term they'd have like games and stuff. And one of the things they used to do is show movies, and they showed Gremlins, and I'd gone to the cinemas and seen that, and it was pretty scary. For me, when it was in there, I didn't know I was going to see it. I went with cousins, and my auntie took me. I didn't even know what was going on. But I remember seeing it in school in the class on like a VHS cassette with a TV screen and stuff. And it's very interesting in the area I grew up in. There used to be a I don't know if it's Mormon or anything like that, but they're called the Plymouth Brethren, if I can say that right. And very interesting people. We had them all around us in my area and stuff, and they're very nice, very, very genuine and nurturing, and but kept to themselves. They didn't deal with technology. They had cars and stuff, but they wouldn't deal with media or technology, radios, TVs and all that sort of stuff. They were very isolated from those sort of influences. So they're very pure beings. They wouldn't eat at our lunchtime with us, and they wouldn't socialize with us, but they would be in class and stuff, and then they'd go home for lunch and recess and stuff. So you imagine they've never seen anything like this and that. I remember the showing of this Gremlins, they were in hysterics of like trauma, like absolutely bawling their eyes out, couldn't handle it after not very long. And this is me, like, I've desensitized to the violence, right, and the horror and all that, but they've never witnessed it, and it totally viscerally freaked them out, like in hysterics. They went out crying and stuff, and it's like, obviously at 10 or 11 or 9, you don't really understand that stuff, but now I get it, and I could measure. Back then I could appreciate that, wow, they've never appreciated violence or never seen it and stuff like that, right? So having that very pure, isolated existence, it was horrific, right? It's probably scarred them to this day, and but I do really remember that, okay? So what I'm getting to is, so I have an appreciation of many aspects of it, and just because how I am, obviously being an Aussie guy growing up during the 80s and 90s and stuff, there's a lot of violent content. We get a lot of stuff from US, so there is a desensitization to the visceral reaction of violence, and I think we've all observed that. A lot of us have a lot of issues, particularly parents and stuff like that, and the impact of that. But what I'm wanting to get to is a very specific observation relative to that. And as I said, I feel very fortunate that a lot of people over the years have trusted me that are very aware. To me, it's a sign of a reflection of my development and my journey and my thoroughness and healing, that very aware people trust my presence. Or maybe it's just there's the quality out there is so shit that I just fit in. But no, I know I do a lot, and I have a lot of respect, and when I talk about being professional and stuff like that, this is work. I'm in business sort of mode, alright? So, and up until 2020, early 2020, I was like very proactive on interacting and helping people and stuff, because I knew there was some crunch going on, and without the context, but now with the context, we all know what's gone on and stuff. Being sort of set up for failure and all that sort of stuff, and sabotage, and just trying to eke your way out of stuff. We're all playing catch up, if that makes sense. But with these sort of beings, and it is a very consistent sort of oracle, sort of high level, particularly FEMA, is they really can't handle violence at all, alright? A bit like the Plymouth Brethren, but it's visceral constantly, alright? Like I had with that experience with the Predator. And what I want to do is just offer you, perhaps we've all had experiences of potentially being visceral, very potentially in ourselves, violently visceral about something, and witnessing something, or the frequencies of beings around us. And what I'm trying to do is use this quite consistent across the board relative to violence and the visceral reaction, because that frequency of the visceral has a lot of potential, I feel, that's not really appreciated. So if you've been thorough with my stuff, the Emotional Mastery series is pretty important. The very first one was about feeling is prayer, relative to my experience of going through, the financial troubles and stuff, and having to learn to budget the emotions that I was living very humbly. And I got to the point where I worked out, if I master my emotions, I don't need to eat as much food and stuff like that. Not only that, I got so aware of the body reactions and the emotional sort of impacts. I've got a bird up. I've got a few birds around me. That I learned to splice up the emotions, and then I actually realized, say I use love in Australia, like what I worked out is the actual cultural imprint and potentially TV sort of stuff. It's wired us incorrectly. So going through that very extreme sort of hardship, if I use that diagram that I showed before, say my hardship was very extreme and I had not a lot of energy, but the awareness was very extreme, sort of thing. So I'm flipping that control versus chaos. Like if the hardship was hard, then the awareness was extreme, sort of thing, alright? So I learned to rewire my actual feelings to what they're meant to be. And this is where a lot of people are distorted, because the emotional mastery isn't really something that's taught in schools, let alone meditation, or it's something we have to sort of find on our journeys, because it's not culturally sort of endorsed. That's the word I was looking for. So I have that emotional understanding, mastery, technology, awareness sort of thing. And what I'm wanting to do is actually, say, doing the earth pranic healings and stuff like that, and the craziness that the world's going on. I'm sure you're feeling your potential rise, alright? You're feeling stuff that may be dormant, awakening sort of thing, alright? So it might be a good topic. Awakening to the potential within you. Awakening our dormant potential. Something like that. Alright? So I've tried to, even if you don't feel that aversion to violence, alright? Even if you've gotten to the desensitized state, or you still have a reaction, or it's something there, what I'm inviting you to do is use violence as a tool here, alright? So, and I'm not saying go and watch violence and destroy your psyche like the Plymouth Brethren people and stuff like that, but what I'm doing is inviting you to come to the precipice of that visceral, alright? And I want to actually, this is a big point, what I feel, alright, it's not actually the violence that's the issue, it's you've actually got an imprint or a code or a DNA modification, alright, that's actually shutting down your extreme talents, alright? And why I say that is, and maybe I'll include a short clip here about the Babylon massacre, because then you can hear what is being done to our DNA and all that, alright? So I'll show you, because I was going to do a psychic defense sort of show when I was going through a video relative to Ashiana, and yeah, this violent sort of visceral sort of thing I got the potential of, right? So what I might do, I'll just show you these clips here if I've got them, and I'll see you on the other side. They're not very long.
In density 4, we have the first black heart. It's called the Heart of Merlin. It's the D10.75 implant that draws attachments into the D11 trion field, the DNA strand templates 10 and 11, chakras 10 and 11, and the density 4 atomic etheric elemental emotional bodies of the avatar body. That's the one that will help us to be severed completely at D11.5 and rotated out of our own template. That's what they're trying to do on a planetary level here. And anybody that goes down with the planet has that happen. It's literally like you have your template here, and you're in here, and your primal light fields in direct connection to source are here. Well, it's like cutting out the middle, flipping it backwards, and throwing it down a hole. It's still within the greater consciousness of source, but it's cut off completely from its template that allows the communication lines to be open. But there's a few pieces that keep sticking in my mind. One is the reminder that they gave us in that about the parts I already knew about the 3,470 BC Babylon massacre. Now, the stargates weren't even open at that time, but they blasted something in the Earth's core enough with photosonic frequency that it caused activation, a partial activation of the fourth black heart of Metatron, the heart of Anubis. That was enough. One day, probably 1 hour it took, to literally wipe the memory banks and totally genetically mutate an entire planet of people. The 4 black heart Metatronic implants, have been only 2/3 activated since the 3,470 BC Babylon massacre, Tower of Babel Bible story, which we've talked about in the Voyagers books and some other workshops, when the Wesedex implemented partial activation of the 4th heart of Anubis implant, through which the density 1 radial body memory matrix of Earth and humanity was partially wiped, and the Wesedek Nephilim net field artificial Metatronic radial body and its intentionally scripted false memory complex were activated within our planetary shields and collective consciousness radial fields. Now, we've known about the ones, people who have followed this work, but we were given information quite a bit ago. We were getting the information on what's happened to our Templar about the 3,470 BC Babylon massacre. They called it Babylon because that's the Tower of Babel story, where after it was done, we were babbling on ever since. Nobody could speak the same language. What this did, I never understood quite how it was done. It was never explained how it was done. It was done through partially activating the black heart that's centered down here in the density 1 body. And it literally, this happened within a couple hours on one day. One day. It took a race that was way far advanced to us, completely destroyed its language patterns. They had to be re-educated in language. They came in and taught us partial reversal languages. The languages we have now are partially original human and partially have coding that stimulates the implants in the DNA template. But literally in one day, using this technology had the ability to wipe a race's memory clean, completely. They didn't know who they were. It was like an electromagnetic wave that moved through the atmosphere. Now science is already figuring out here that magnetics affect the function of the brain and the DNA. Well, this was major magnetics. This is why we haven't a clue of who we are right now. This is also what caused the next level of mutation that made us, I think at that point we were living quite a bit longer, that limited our Earth, like our body's lifespan to the 70 to 100 years if we're lucky, because it created horrible chemical mutations. All these things we're talking about, every shadow dancer connection, every figment connection, every elemental connection that's reverse matrix, it has what's called chemical claws. Each of them manifest as a chemical or hormonal substance or viral substance or bacterial substance within the body that doesn't belong there. The body eats itself alive, technically. These are real things that are manifest, particularly in the hormone systems. Within the DNA chains themselves, it's mismatched the way the nucleotide bases in the chemical DNA are supposed to be lined up with each other. It's completely mismatched them and turned off 3/4 of them. So this is like heavy stuff that's going on here. It's not just fluffy stuff about our auric fields. It's about the chemicals that make up the atoms in our body and the chemicals that allow our brains to function here. So it just amazed me, and this is where I started to think, oh boy, I can hardly wait till tomorrow's transmission after the end of this. because I kept in mind that that was something I didn't realize quite as much. It just hit me when they said that it was just activation of just that one, and only like 2/3 activation of it, that did that in one day. Then we go on to this.
Welcome back. So I haven't actually gone to the extreme of actually offering clips relative to the Babylon massacre and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm sort of allowing you to come to the conclusion of yourself is there's been a lot of frackery with our DNA, depending on different people and stuff. And what I'm seeing is a pattern of these very aware beings that have that visceral to violent content. Right? What I'm wanting to do is flip it. I actually, that visceral sort of like self-imposed prison, all right? And I'm not saying going like, I'm not saying to go and devour violence like there's no tomorrow, right? What I'm wanting to do is bring you to that edge of that. You imagine you touch, like, I've been to farms and there's electric fences. So you get to the edge of the fence and you lean over it and you get an electric shock, right? That visceral, self-imposed DNA limitation is exactly, to me, like I talked in one of the Chronic Killings of the Earth. I talked about J. Seals and Captain Marvel, and the movie Captain Marvel with the thing on the left hand side, right? And I might show the image now over this, right? Because if you watch that movie, it's a very, very good metaphor, and I really, hey birdies, joining in, I strongly recommend it for a teaching. I also recommend Green Lantern. I said that before, the 2011 movie for the Phantom Matrix sort of like taking over everything, but yeah, what I'm really trying to be, to give you the energy of the field and invite you to contemplate that visceral fencing. It's more than just the aversion to violence, because this is the thing, alright? To me, alright, what it is, it's the systems that has identified you as a soul, and you're probably in very good body technology, and it's trying to corral your technology as a freaking badass warrior, alright? So when you come to the violence, it's making you feel polarized to the violence, because you can probably do a lot of harm with your talents, alright? And I'm not wanting people to be violent or anything like that. Responsibility, not reacting to all this stuff, alright? So that visceral, alright, to me, it's like the DNA modification relative to, say, the Babylon massacre, and it's actually you're imposing the limit on yourself by the visceral and not the correct interpretation of what that is. What if it's your potential? You're coming to a barrier that the system does not want you to penetrate, and you're accommodating it, alright? And I'm using this violence metaphor as a metaphor for anything, okay? Because a lot of people, as I said, the feeling is prayer, are miswired, alright? And I don't think it's just like the cultural thing. I think it's like from Babylon Massacre and other things, alright? But I'm trying to really give you the mechanics to invite you to observe yourself, not only yourself, but others. And even the desensitization to it, so you don't actually feel that visceral. So we're being like drowned in violent sort of content, alright? So I think there's two there's two components where we're just like buried under it and we're desensitized, so we don't even know this, so we just like dismiss it, or it's our barrier and we self-impose that limit. And like if you watch the Thor movies, there's a Valkyrie, like a female warrior sort of thing that's a Valkyrie. So yeah, I really got that big time. It's not a joke, alright? And hey, I'm just doing this a quick insert. What the language I was probably trying to get to, and this is pretty simple, is that visceral is something that's not you. It's something that's been inserted, and that very specific, energetic, vibrational, emotional feel of it is an indicator of it, and it can be spliced up. So if you can splice it up, then you can identify it and nullify it, and then you can get to the other side of it, which is your talents or your abilities or your awareness or the next level of who you are. That's what I just want to insert. There's a lot that is us, like the feeling rewiring and consciously what we've taken on board and imprinted on us and all that, which isn't us, but blah blah blah. But this is something very specific. It's a corralling of energy and potential, I feel. It's very, very specific. You might not be emotionally mastery of those sort of variances and the subtleties of it, but I invite you to contemplate this, alright? So back to the video. It can be things going on in the world and the imposition and the control, and you got the visceral because potentially there's many things with that visceral, alright? And this is what I'm saying about the predator and all my experience with violence and all that sort of stuff, and it can be a past life experience of actually going through stuff, because we've all, if you watch, there's a Netflix movie that's really cool called The Old Guard, right? It's about these eternal beings that are just killed and all that sort of stuff, and they come back to life. So you imagine you die a lot of times in like, or Infinite maybe as well, sort of thing, or even Assassin's Creed, where they go into the DNA and the memory of being an assassin sort of thing, right? So how about this? Potentially you've been identified through the incarnation grid and all that sort of stuff, and this stuff's been inserted into you to get that visceral. And I'm pretty consistent with these sort of women. They're indigos that are breeders, that have been through the Ayani massacre, and even in this life they've had guys track them down and all sorts of stuff, right? So those of you that have that pattern, and be honest with yourself, if you haven't, you haven't, alright? Don't just like, yeah, that's fucking me, blah blah blah, I'm so fucking great, alright? I think that variable is out there, and probably the audience, you guys that follow me, are probably a higher percentage than normal places and stuff because of who I am and what I've been through and stuff. But I really want you to, the key, right, if you go back and listen to the Emotional Mastery 1 of how I went through the mechanics, what if you give that body reaction a different what if you associate a different meaning to the visceral? What if instead of it's a offense, it's like, here I fucking am, alright? Pardon my language. Here I freaking am, like, this is the thing, alright? A lot of those visceral reactions, and people actually don't like to feel stuff. They're numb, alright? And when they get a feeling like a visceral, they're like, ooh! Most people want to like stamp it out, alright? They don't like actually feeling truth. The reason why I feel like the world works how it is most people are actually, I've talked about truth, and truth is a big thing for me. They don't actually live truth, they don't speak the truth, and they don't share truth. They've all got agendas and lack and all these sort of things, right? So it's very important with this that you're very, very honest with yourself about this, because if you have a foundation of truth and stuff, then you can launch from, and it's a consciousness Tetris. And the big thing about this, and even if you don't have the association with violence, you can tune into it using empathy and appreciate it, and tune into that visceral sort of like corralling of yourself into your body, because I truly think it's a DNA related thing. And Carlene's out there, and I have talked to her about this because I worked it out and she's like the DNA surgeon and stuff, so it's not a joke, right? But I'm using the violence as a codex of key for all of it, right? And then what you'll be is like, you'll be like the first domino, and then you'll be off and running, because then you'll be unlocking your own self like me, right? And I'm not bragging or anything, but I've just like freaking can't trust anyone but yourself. So, that's all I needed all along. So then I go in and trust these mechanics and the interpretation, because I'm very, very, like, I'm not a visual person, I'm a feel sort of algorithm sort of thing, alright? So if I show you that algorithm image, alright, so most people, they're governed by what they know, alright? Imagine if their feeling technology is shut down and accommodating the world, alright? So, but what if you go into the unknown and allow this to be a variable that you contemplate and reflect on, and go back through your life through instances of stuff and see what happens, alright? Because I know some really amazing people that are very, very, they can't handle a lot of the Netflix series and stuff, and it's really cool. It's like, I appreciate it. I'm not trying to force people into stuff or go and like be like Clockwork Orange with the eyes, like devour it. But a cool movie for this metaphor is Excalibur, and the whole Camelot thing is so upside down. You guys that I've sent the UIR audio of Michael talking about the Camelot era and stuff, what was going on with it relative to not the Grail quests but the Stargate quests and stuff. But there's really cool, I grew up on that movie and I love it. And there's this one particular brave knight called Percival. I think it's Percival, I haven't seen it for a while, but Arthur lost his soul sort of thing in that movie, and he forgot his secret, so he sent all the knights out on a Grail quest, and Percival was one of the ones that stuck through it. And there's a couple of times where he got the opportunity to find the Grail, and the first time he got very scared, alright, and he backed out and he freaked out and he ran away. The second time he went through it, and it's very elegant and poetic. Like he loses his arm, he sheds his skin, he becomes bare and pure. And instead of going on the external Grail quest, he remembers the secret is Arthur forgot is you're in the land of one. And it's, yeah, I love that movie. And so maybe watch that movie. It might be a good one to test relative violence, because there is some violence in it, and see how you feel, because the knights, and we've probably all been at Camelot and tried to help back then, you know. But yeah, just watch these scenes. You might come to the edge and you might shy away, and it's very brave to be on the edge, you know. Like I've talked about skydiving and sitting on the edge. It's like freaking, that's scary, alright? And you lose control, alright? What I'm suggesting is that loss of body control is actually a DNA implant that's blocking you from your technology and your greatest aspects to you that on the other side. So it's like a fence. So this is quite a complicated thing to sort of try and explain and invite you in. Like, I'm using the language to allow you to empathize with it, and if you don't have it, then to empathize with it. And if you've lost the sensitivity to violence and you can consume a lot, then maybe go and see what does trigger you. Because I think no, I don't think I know. It's probably a past life experience. So you can notice the subtleties between what's not there and what's there. But then it's also, you can get very in tune with your body and see what does come up, and maybe associate that, what you've been through, as trauma. You know what I mean? We've all, like, The Old Guard, I highly recommend on Netflix, for we're old souls and we've been through a lot and stuff, and we've had to endure a lot of things. So yeah, I don't want to make this too long. I hope you awaken what is dormant within you and realize that, and have the courage to get on the other side. A lot of the people I know, they don't listen to my stuff and all that, so I'm gonna make them earn it. But some of you are pretty hardcore and you're thorough with me, and I know this interpretation will invite you to contemplate that feeling on another level, because I think once you are able to appreciate that and overcome it, and I'm feeling my third eye, a lot of you guys are already getting it through time. I feel you'll go to the next level. And I show you this image, I've shown this many times. So the metaphor is that fence is our self-imposed limits, because we don't understand the context of the visceral reaction. So don't accommodate it, guys. Alright? Have the courage to penetrate it and get to the other side. If I give you the codex that it is your DNA is being fracked with to prevent your talents that are on the other side, is that an incentive to want to get beyond it and disarm it and shut it down once and for all? I'm brewing to do more influencers shows, so I found some really cool content relative to how DNA is messed with and all that sort of stuff relative to the Ashiana and stuff, but give it a different interpretation. Like, appreciate it as your potential. It's like going, hello, I'm here, this is where you need. Don't shy away from it. Play with it a bit to disarm it and reinterpret it as potential on the other side, alright? So I hope this is quite interesting. This is why I wanted to associate with Amplify the Echoes of Our Soul's Ancient Truth series, because what I'm getting is the indigos, the guardians, the founder beings, etc. Have been the most traumatized, most targeted, most old guard sort of beings that have been beaten up through time and stuff like that. And we've all got a lot of trauma related to the targeting and the suppression relative to the occupation of planet Earth. But as I've said earlier in the series, we're just giving them a head start. Right? So I hope this helps you endure and mitigate what's going on. Helps you disarm the visceral sort of triggering and all that sort of stuff. You rearm yourself and reinvest that energy relative to your emotions in a very nourishing way for your body. And what I'm going to do is leave on a really awesome tough love theme video relative to Asha, to leave it on a high note. And yeah, as I said, and I've said many times, if I'm worthy of being included in your journey, I thank you. I appreciate your commitment and your dedication to being here now, and whatever challenges you might be feeling in your region. It's pretty epic, pretty crazy. I hope the videos that I made in the past have helped you to give you clarity and get your own codex going. If you've explored the Earth Pranic healings that I've done last weekend, I hope they helped you and you got some healing with it. Not a lot of people watch them, or I think the stats aren't accurate and stuff, but And there's a lot of people that don't believe in me in that level, and that's cool. It's probably because they've been left behind, right? Because I'm going to new levels, and I'm aiming to be a match to my journey relative to this. I'm aiming for those stars, or those people that I haven't met yet, that I haven't been a match to. So that's my incentive to keep developing and growing in my process of whatever I am to be, right? So I thank you. I thank you for the courage to be here. I hope I help you to refocus and empower yourself, and to just endure whatever you're going on. I think it's an incredible time. I think it's an incredible, brave time to be here. And I think everything's being done to prevent us just being how we are now. So you've got to give yourself a pat on the back, and if you're finding it a bit tough, just take a step back. Take it one breath at a time. Just get that breath perfect. Build on the breath, and then don't think too far down ahead. It's quite unpredictable and all that sort of stuff. So I hope this clip at the end helps, and it rearms you. And I introduced some extra sort of concepts. I've tried to be quite simple with what I've shared and stuff, but if you paid attention to the clips over all the series and all the other ones I do, this will probably add to it as well, and the ones in this. So thank you guys, lots of love. Until next time, and I'm going to look to do more Earth planet healings. I'll give it a bit of a rest, let people catch up, but I'm also going to include the sun, and we'll see what happens in the future. This is Maximus Bradius signing out. Until next time, lots of love, guys. Peace.
But before we do that, I want to get to, I just want to read this to you. The whole thing, I was trying to think, well, I'll just highlight certain things. I think I just want to read it to you as it came. And when we get to the point, the ending is important, well, so is the beginning, because the beginning explains, it just gives you a run on the whole thing. But it brings us up to a point of understanding magentas, and the fact that if this doesn't help you to understand why it's so important that the technologies we're being given are being given, if this can't answer the question of where is the love in giving people technologies that are at least 500 to 1,000 years beyond their maturity level right now, if it wasn't a huge issue going down on this planet, if we weren't loved hugely, this information would not be being given now. They'd baby us if we want to be babied. They'd pat us on the head and say, okay, you just have to say 3 Hail Marys a day and you'll be just fine. You know, go to confession once a week and everything. We'll take care of it for you. Or the angels and archangels will fix it for you. Actually, if they loved you, they wouldn't say that. Because what they're saying is, be a perpetual child that I can manipulate forever, please. Beings that need to tell you they'll do it for you and fix it for you are feeding off your energy. Why would they want to do that? Are they expressing love? It can look like that on the surface. If you love a being, you will do everything in your power, even if it means getting them mad at you sometimes. You know how you can get a kid mad at you? I hate you because you wouldn't buy me that in the store. Well, that's okay if you need to feel that way right now. But a good parent will not put their own ego first, and because it hurts their feelings that the kid will say, I hate you, they will still say, well, this is still the rule right now, because they know that's going to help that child grow up to be a loving, decent, self-responsible human being. The beings that we communicate with will not ever be, they don't need your approval. They love you, but they are not dependent on you loving them back, because they love God and they love themselves as a face of God, and they are at one and in tune with the universe. They don't need to fix anybody's problem, but they will help whenever their help is genuinely helpful. But if you offer help or force help on someone or con somebody into thinking that you have the power to help them more easily than they have the power to help themselves, you are undermining their own connection to God. You're insulting the face of God that lives within them, and you're helping them to stay disempowered and fragile and easily manipulated and vulnerable. So there is a difference. The love question is very important, and there are some high lessons to learn. Did anybody ever think about what might a real Christ-conscious being be? Like maybe what if, like everybody likes to envision Jesus as the Christ-conscious being, he became the symbol for that. What if Jesus did float down on a spaceship? What do you think he'd know? Do you think he'd just walk around saying, open your heart, surrender your power to Archangel Michael? I don't think so. Would he say, surrender your power to Big Dragon King in the sky over here? He wouldn't say, surrender your power to anybody. Jesus taught the teachings of the inner Christos, which are the teachings of the Templar, the inner Templar. We all have a part of ourselves that holds that awareness and knowledge. We know what it means to hold Christic love. Jesus could be a very tough person. He was known by some of us in this room because we were there incarnationally with a group of Essenes. There was a group of us that were doing those teachings. You should have seen him when he got mad. He didn't get mad for long, but what he did was he allowed the reality and the truth of the immediate emotion and feeling and reality of the moment and the truth of himself to move through him. He didn't pretend he was beyond emotion. He let it move through him and transmuted it as it went. Now, there's a lot of things that we've been taught about what a Christ-conscious being is or is not, more so what they are. We've been given false images of things that float around in white robes all the time and never raise their voice, and they talk in a monotone, and they have glowing blue eyes and things like that. I know Christ-conscious beings that wear jeans and can't read or write. But boy, you should see them touch a plant soul. Or talk to an animal without moving their lips, and have the animal come up and sit on their lap. That's Christ consciousness. I have seen beings who will put themselves in the front line of battle with a gun in their hand that they know darn well they'll probably never use, because they'll take their chances. But they allow themselves to be put in a situation, because if any place needs healing, it's a battlefield. And they would bring their frequency there, sometimes knowing they'd get killed, but because they knew there were soul appointments, that there was a whole bunch of other people going to get killed too, and their field was going to get them out of density 1 so they didn't have to incarnate down here anymore. It's very interesting to try to assume what you think a Christ-conscious being is. And you're not going to know. You won't know how to define it for yourself until you get there. Then you can recognize it. You're not going to be able to fully recognize it unless you have some of that awakened alive in yourself yet. But one of the hardest things to understand in a Christ-conscious being is how they love. We assume that love is defined by the little box of emotion and little joy feelings that our emotional bodies send up through our kundalini. We assume divine love is as limited and tiny is the human's present capacity to know love. And that is an assumption that we will get lost in space with. Divine love is everything it needs to be in order to express love. In physical terms and physics terms, love is a state of vibrational harmonization, which means you need to go into the exact frequency pattern of whatever it is to actually experience what love is. You have to become it. Becoming whatever it is. If it's your shadow, you need to become it to get totally in resonance with it in order to be able to then use your consciousness to move it and heal it. There is a level of love that's very tough in Christ consciousness because it's very adamant about one thing. It understands the mechanics of the hologram. It understands why the matrix was created, because God wanted to fulfill a desire for creation, and it understands the great joy and love that God is, that it created a matrix that would be perpetual and eternal. And it also knows that there are certain ways energy must work for it to remain perpetual and eternal. And a Christ-conscious being, no matter how much you get mad at them, no matter how many nasty words or attitudes or quiet telepathic thoughts you might beam at them about judging them, They're not going to care. They care. They feel bad that you have to limit yourself to those kind of judgments. But they will, at all costs, uphold those laws of creation physics, and they will educate themselves in what they are so they can do a good job upholding it. So this entire matrix, and so God, can express perpetual, unconditional love. We are in a situation, a tough love situation. We have been in a tough love situation many times before, the same one. Guess why we're still here? We didn't get it. The thing we didn't get was the tough love element. Humans were designed to carry Christ consciousness. So it's easy to soft love. But what isn't easy sometimes is to stand up and not allow something that's out of control to harm you, even if it might decide to call you the enemy. Now, right now, there's a whole huge matrix of beings that's larger than our own because it's eaten so many things around it. They choose to call us their enemy. We don't have any enemy. We just have family that doesn't remember each other anymore in our world. But however, family that doesn't remember you and decides that they want you to be the enemy can be very vicious, thoughtless, careless. If we are still naive where we would think that everybody will love the way we do, that was one of the lessons. We assumed everybody was like us. Did you ever get in a situation like that, even with like boy-girl relationship, where, oh, you just love the person so much, and of course you assumed that they'd love you too, and then when they didn't, it devastated you. It was like, it's like emotional gasp. You can't even fathom how that could happen. Well, we are not loved by the people in Phantom Matrix, but worse, we are despised for the people in the Wissadek matrix. We are despised for a reason that a little bit of that comes out in here. And it comes down to who's accountable for your actions? Who are you blaming them on? Whose choices were it that got you into the predicament? And whose hand did you repeatedly bite off when you were offered a hand to try to help you out? All right, there's a blame game going on in the Wissadek matrix. And they use that to justify bad behavior. They use it to justify having the right to abuse other life forms. They're not taking responsibility for the fact that they abused themselves and that they made bad choices, and that if they had once upon a time made a choice that was different, they wouldn't have been in the predicament they're in. They're in a predicament simply because they have created a situation where they can't get out of the black hole system no matter what God does. Because there is still the way energy works, and when frequency is mutated that badly, it will eventually implode on itself. Here's where the mercy is. It will implode on itself and then clear and go back to its original form, but not in its original form as the shape it was in. It will go back to units of consciousness that no longer have a memory matrix or an identity template. It goes back to ashes, dust to dust, where your consciousness becomes space dust. That's what they have created for themselves, and nobody can get them out of it. What they can do, if they were ever open to anything that would help them, what do you say to a race? I mean, you can understand, it's perfectly understandable that they behave as badly as they do. They're totally in the survival of the fittest. They're totally into competition for limited supply, because that is the reality in their world that they created. They have limited supply of life force. They have to suck it off other things. They have to steal to get their food, and if they don't, they implode. They don't have a choice except to have a little dignity, which they're not going to find because they don't have 12th strand. Without 12th strand, the Christos consciousness connection, it's very difficult to find dignity at this level. They created a situation where they're going to return to God in pieces. They know they won't have any memory once they die. They know that there's nothing that can be done, so they figure, do whatever we can to sustain it, no matter who it hurts, no matter who it was, who did what. If they could be accountable, they could at least make peace with themselves. But they're still faced, and I have a huge amount of compassion for them. They're still faced with a situation. This matrix, they've almost killed. It will not be allowed to be killed. Source is resetting the divine blueprint, whether or not we help. The fact that we're here and we can run the security codes on the Templar means it won't just rip the planet apart and roll it 4 or 5 times to clear it of the mess. It means it'll go more gentle. Not as gentle as we wanted it to, but it'll go more gentle. There is love and there is mercy. And there are shadow dancers. And there are magentas.
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.